Today's episode of the Energy Newsbeat podcast is brought to you by Enverus. The energy industry faces massive challenges every day, and the events over the last 2 years have caused huge disruptions like never before. Companies in the energy industry need actionable intelligence and a single source of truth that brings all the data together. Enverus is the energy specialized technology partner that provides intelligent connections for a global energy ecosystem. Only Enverus has the analytics, people, experience, and industry scope to connect the right data and information in the right way to discover missed opportunities and deliver fast outcomes. Find out more at Enverus.com. That's ENVERUS.com.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Today is not only a great day, it's one of my best kind of days. I get to do a podcast. My name's Stu Turley, President and CEO of the Sandstone Group, and I'll tell you, I got a real treat for you guys today. Today, I have Mark Stansberry, and I've got his book, America Needs Energy. And I'll tell you, this is a fabulous book. I have really enjoyed getting to read it. Thank you, Mark, for stopping by the podcast today.
Thanks, Stu. Glad to be here. Excited about it.
You know what's really fun is that when you're an author, and I'm an author wannabe. I'm kind of sitting here kind of wanting to be an author. But this book, when was this book written, Mark?
It was written in 2011 and through 2012. We released it in 2012. And
when you write a book in 2012 and it stands up the test of time, right, it is fabulous.
Well, America. I thought America needs America's energy. And the sub-theme was creating together the people's energy plan. It was really written because there was, all forms of energy being proposed for the future. And I thought we need a debate, we need a dialogue, and creating together means everybody would do their homework and see what they could do to look at that. And then, of course, now as you mentioned, there's a supplement, actually a monograph that we released just recently to bring things up to date as far as the debate, because there's still a lot of dialogue and debate in the future, and I think we needed some platform to go to, and that's why it was done.
You know what's fun is your background in the book. I want to start with a compliment. Sorry about that. I don't mean to compliment you, but I really enjoyed when I was looking at the book that this is not just a book. It's written in a way to really try to get you to think, right, and say, wait a minute. Is this, not only does America need energy, how does it impact me? Now, when you've got worksheets in here, you've got how many bags of trash do you put out? Right. And people still aren't thinking about that, Mark. How'd you come up with that?
No, well, back in 1992, I had been a part of a delegation, oil and gas delegation to Russia. And right before that I'd left, I'd been visiting with Dr. Gus Gertz at the University of Oklahoma about putting an energy conference together. International Conference on Energy and Environment was the title at the time, and it wound up ending as International Energy Policy Conference. International Energy Policy Conference, and we had this conference all over the U.S. and we went to OU, but then we went to Washington D.C. and had it in Houston and Dallas and Denver and other locations. But the theme what I'm getting to was striving for energy efficiency and environmental preservation. Right. And if we look at from a balance of energy efficiency and environmental preservation, since 30 years ago, that's been my theme. I still stay with that, because if we can find that balance and work together, all these natural resources can be used to the fullest. And oil and gas is a big part of that.
It's also kind of funny. You just have so much in this book. You can tell by my little things in here. When you talk about the operating refineries and my head's exploding because I've got all these things to talk about. If you look at page 32, you look at the top net world exporters in 2010. U.S. isn't on this bad dog list. And then you go over here, and in 2019, United States is right up there in the top.
Right.
That made a significant difference on just gearing up in the shale revolution.
No question about it. It goes back to technology and innovation that really launched it. And since I wrote a book called The Breaking Point, Global Dreams and Economic Realities, and that was back in 2007. So Stu, from 2007, I wrote this other book, America Needs America's Energy, because there was a gap. I mean, a 5-year gap was a big gap back then, because we were looking at the hydraulic fracturing and so forth going on. And so it changed the world in the sense of launching the basins throughout the United States, not only our part of the world we're used to the Northeast and other regions. So that was a big deal to me, to look at it from, like I say, the breaking point, which was spelled BRAKING, which means the stopping point. It was really, is a theme as well. A sub theme is that we need to stop, even to this day, and look at where, how we're using energy. What's the future of energy? And there's so many people out there, population throughout the world, that don't even have access, close to access. We have about 3.5 billion or so that, wood or other components for energy. Wow. I mean, we've got a challenge ahead of us, so that we're not just looking at ourselves, how we're going to do in the United States, but how are we going to have energy for a child overseas that, needs light to read from it, but at 6, 7, 8 o'clock, whatever time the sun goes down, they don't have that. They don't have access. They don't have access to refrigeration, to all these other things. So we've got a big job ahead of us, and that's why it's creating together the energy plan. It's not just ourselves; it takes all of us. So the future of energy depends on all of us. And so, Stu, you're doing a great job. What you're doing, you're getting the word out, and I really salute you for what you're doing. And wow, the impact that you've had is tremendous, and I appreciate what you're doing. But keep on trucking.
Man, I'll pay you later,
well,
because
you're benefiting us. So the benefits is part of it.
You started this though way back when, and I've only been doing this for about 4 or 5 years and doing this kind of thing. And you sit back and kind of go, even back then, you have misinformation about the industry.
Right.
And way back then, the wind and solar started coming back in. And I think, don't you think one of the biggest problems that the oil and gas industry has had is not spreading the word, or the goodness of what it really is?
I agree with you, Stu. I put on some roundtables across the country about 10 years ago, about the same, a little bit after the book was written. I went on a circuit, but also had roundtables to get some feedback, and found out that we're not getting the word out properly. In fact, I went to a school back east and gave a talk, and they didn't really know much about natural gas. They barely really knew much really about oil. They knew more about coal than anything. And it was really, it took me back, because I'm going, it's unbelievable as far as mind-boggling, I guess I'd say, for us to think that we've got the message out and we're not even close to it. And that's why this podcast you have, podcast I have, and our good friends at OGGN and others, thank goodness they're getting this message out, because we've got a great future ahead for America, and we've got to be better at messaging, and we can't stop messaging. That's important.
Hey, by the way, congratulations on your new podcast. Tell us what that is.
Yes, it's called the Energy Fellows. It starts officially October 4th. Then we'll be having interviews with senior energy fellows and industry leaders, thought leaders in the energy business. And in fact, you're going to be one of our guests as well, Stu. So I'm excited about this.
I'll pay you later.
Well, I'm adding to the bill here, so but no, it's going to be fantastic to work with like yourself, but with OGGN and Mark LaCour, Paige Wilson, all those folks there are fantastic. Wonderful.
I'll tell you, I've really enjoyed getting to know Mark, and just give him a shout out for his industry leader as well. I had so much fun with him at the Enverus event, and we are an absolute hoot. And because of Mark, he is got it right. And he's got you a producer for your podcast. He's got it all set up, and you're just the talent.
Well, I appreciate that opportunity, because it helps to have that avenue, a pathway that I can have to go. In fact, I just got back from, of course, I'm here in Oklahoma, and just got back from Houston, and was able to give 3 or 4 talks, and for
Nice.
talks and come back and have it all lined up and work with you on this. And then we're going to be interviewing you here pretty soon as well. So it's great.
Oh, I'll tell you, Mark McClure is absolutely a hoot, but we're going to have to say some bad things about him here in this podcast and just kind of see if he listens to either one of our podcasts.
There you go. We got to have something. Yeah, that's right. I like your idea.
But again, congratulations. And you're truly a industry thought leader, especially with your CNG back then. And I don't understand why CNG never took off. And you've got some serious experience in CNG.
Yes. Well, and that's, it comes back to what the electric vehicle industry is going through right now. And that's infrastructure. We had infrastructure to a certain degree, in certain states, but not everywhere could you get CNG. And I think that's a big challenge for any industry, any thought to go, whether it's CNG or hydrogen or electric vehicles. Right. And then also the factor was the maintenance side of it. How do you maintain? You can go into a car dealership or wherever across the US and, you'll be taken care of. But when you come down to CNG or electric vehicles, do we have not only infrastructure of where you're going to charge or where you're going to fill, but it's really looking at it from a standpoint of the workers, the trained workforce, the idea that you're going to have enough electricity to provide the energy for your electric vehicle out in the middle of nowhere is something we had to battle, and CNG as well, because I saw Boone Pickens. In fact, he was very active back in the 90s. Right. I saw him and his activity of what he was trying to do. And so I thought, I was young at the time, much younger. And I thought, this would be a great opportunity to invest in CNG. So we had a company called NGV, Natural Gas Vehicle, NGV Inc. And I wound up driving a dual fuel car, both unleaded and CNG, right. And tested it and so forth. And we were I had two engineers were trying to get the tanks even smaller, because they have to install them. But that was back in the 90s. And so 30 years later, it did not launch. Yet I think there's some great opportunities when it comes, especially to the trucks, like what Boone was talking about. And so, in fact, please.
Mark, doesn't it seem like we just totally missed the boat? We could have saved so many bazillion pounds, and that's a technical term in Oklahoma, bazillion.
There you go. You got it. That's right.
You sit back and kind of go, CNG is clean. And you sit back and kind of, compressed natural gas, and it's like LNG, liquid natural gas. You sit back and go, that's some really clean technology. And when we look at EVs, even electrical vehicles, they got all of the battery technology that you got to dig on. You got to go through all this kind of stuff. The US has got lots of natural gas. Yeah. Wouldn't it have been cheaper to start back in the 90s? We wouldn't have a lot of these questions.
We'd be there. Yeah, I agree with that. It's interesting. About the same time in 2012, Stu, back years ago, I became a partner, first of all, of a gentleman. His name's Greg Fredrickson. He produced the Godfather movies, won Academy Award for Godfather 2.
Oh, nice.
And Apocalypse Now. Well, why I say all that is he and I formed a company about 20 years ago because he moved back from Hollywood, Beverly Hills, and we formed this company because he said, I need a partner to help me through this production company I want to put together in Oklahoma because I'm moving back. Right. And I said, okay, I'll look at it. I wasn't really that in. I said, I don't know anything about the movies and all that. But he said, yeah, but you understand, the financials, all those kind of things. And you'd be helpful. So we formed a company, it was originally named, Gray and Mark. So it's called Gray Mark Productions. And we went on to produce, the Gray Mark went on to produce 5 featured films and got an Emmy for one of the documentaries. And it was related to oil, actually. Nice. Because of the life of Robert S. Kerr, who Robert S. Kerr.
Oh, yeah.
So the bottom line on this was there was a gentleman, Robert Hefner III, that drilled these deep gas wells in the Anacortes Basin, 24,000 feet. I remember when I was 13 years old, the Green well came in, and that was prolific well. And it was they said, everyone said that can't be done. You can't drill 24,000 feet and come in with a great natural gas well. And Robert Hefner III through GHK. Right. Showed that could happen. Well, long story short, trying to get there, Gray, I took the book that Robert Hefner had written,
Right.
and it was called The Grand Energy Transition.
Right.
And it was talking about natural gas and hydrogen and the future of energy. And so it wound up that I talked to Gray about this would be a great, this is a book I want you to look at. This would be great for a documentary for the future, because I'm really plugged into energy. He said, and he looked at it and said, Robert Hefner III. He said, that was my roommate in college. And so it wound at OU. And so it wound up that we put together a documentary called The Grand Energy Transition, the GET, back in 2012, talking about just what you're talking about, Stu, the transition. And we were looking at CNG, natural gas, and the future of natural gas, LNG, and so forth, and up to hydrogen and where we are today. And it was well received. And our partners on that, our investment partners that supported this, were Boone Pickens, Ted Turner, Aubrey McClendon, and some others. And it was really interesting because you take Aubrey and Boone, they're pretty close on their politics and so forth and their policies. But here you had Ted as well, looking at how to change the future. So it was not embraced. To get down to the nitty gritty, why is, I think it goes back to the support that was needed to really start what Boone wanted to do, and what Robert and others wanted to do, is go to the trucking industry. And that would have changed dramatically. If the truck industry had supported it and gone forward with it, we'd have all these fill stations today around the country, and it would have developed more. So anyway, appreciate you listening to that part of it. But that was, I think, a very important part of my life, was not only the book and getting out in the circuit, but it was well received. We had, talks at, from Harvard to New York Times Energy Conference, on and on. And there was debate going on. There was dialogue. That was in 2012. It's changed a lot, Stu, but we're trying to get it back through these podcasts and messaging and speeches. We're going to get there, because there's a lot of technology and innovation yet to be explored. A lot of incubators and other things that are all over the U.S. We've got a big future for our country, but let us loose so we can do it.
Absolutely. Now, I think that we've almost come full circle, Mark, and I'll tell you, besides having, Germany was going on for so many years touting the green effect, printing money, saying, hey, we're going to print all this. And again, Mark, you and I have one goal, and that is, let's get the lowest cost kilowatt per hour to the entire planet. Let's use all forms of energy. And that is, let's elevate humanity out of poverty. You can't do that when you're printing money to subsidize wind farms. In fact, Warren Buffett? He said, there's no reason to invest in a wind farm unless there's a tax subsidy. Right. And so we're sitting here, we've got Europe failing in an energy crisis. We have the Nord Stream 1 and 2 getting blown up by somebody. And, I don't even want to talk about who I think it is, because, Putin, I wouldn't put it past himself blowing up his own pipeline. But you sit back and kind of look, we've got a disaster coming along, and the U.S. is the only one that has the extra capacity to increase our oil and our natural gas. The rest of the world does not have the capacity to grow, but we're not going to be able to do that.
Right. We're curtailed in when we could be opening up the basins and pipeline. I mean, it's so frustrating when we have the natural gas sitting, waiting to be tapped in the Northeast, especially. And I tried to do some work. I worked for the company. I was actually on a board of a company. We were doing work in West Virginia, Pennsylvania, New York. We had leases in New York, and we had to just, let them expire. Could not tap into that. So really, I look at it from the standpoint of we have the resource. Not only do we have the resource, we've already developed a lot of it. At least, and we can't help anyone if they don't let us open up and let us get busy. That's true.
Well, Mark, the LNG regasification up there in, I believe it's Boston, because they have that silly, anti pipelines. They've already brought in, I'm guessing, 10 this year, loads of LNG from Russia, from Nigeria, and all these other kind of places. And you got the Marcellus sitting up there, Mark. they got what, an 8-hour drive, and which is nothing for a pipeline, and they could have. Now they're paying European prices. Because they're fighting for the LNG. Good grief!
Oh, it's crazy. That's as I was referencing the Marcellus course being West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and New York, where we were working. We had an office. One of the offices we had was in Pittsburgh, and we found that Pittsburgh was, those in Pittsburgh that we were working with, and those in the community were very supportive. But there's part of the government, really, it comes down to, not the people so much, is once the people understood that what we're trying to do and help their economy and help them make a good living and so forth, very supportive. But where we had the bog down was definitely in the legislatures, and that really is tough when they're not educated. And so we've been trying very hard to make sure that we get the message out by, I have so many books that I've given out with no cost to make sure stakeholders have a copy of the book, so they can at least reference. I hope they have kept those and put them not on a shelf but active.
Well,
but that's a challenge. It's a challenge.
This is a time warp. I would love to know when you signed this, because I don't know. I went ahead and paid for the extra signed copy, which is kind of cool, just so I'd have your signature. And I can't wait till we have barbecue and you can sign this one. But you sit back and kind of go, this supplement that you have is fabulous because it's updated with a lot of facts that back up everything that you said in this one. Very rarely do you have a supplement that actually matches this. So I'm sorry for complimenting you. But holy smokes.
Well, I feel great because we're on the Mark LaCour list now. That's good to get complimented. I like that deal. It's really interesting. I had come across, monographs in the past, and I thought, wow, that's a great way to go about it, because it's not lengthy, but very concise and a lot of information. Right. And a monograph is really written for a specific subject. And so America needs America's energy and its natural resources. So that applied, of course, as you go through it, you'll see that we talk about as many forms of energy as possible within that monograph. And we had the support of a school you're familiar with, had Oklahoma State University graduate students that, through the CITD, which is the Center for International Trade Development, the executive director, Andrew Ranson, and others, helped back up the document. In that the fact was, I want to, be kind of arm's length in a sense for some of the information, so it's not all coming from, hey, Mark's in the oil and gas business, energy business, and be self-promoting our industry. I really think that what we did was
really show Mark. I'm not going to interrupt you, but did you use Oklahoma State slave labor to help write your supplement?
No slave labor. They got a contribution. It was a grant program that I contributed to help make sure this worked and not be self-leading in itself. So they got a grant. They told me what they thought was truthful, and we incorporated everything that they thought should be in the monograph. It was great. Yeah, that's great. Good question.
The knowledge that you're sharing with everybody does not involve no animals were hurt in the filming of this podcast.
I sure hope not. But no, that's right.
And then we're not using slave labor for American oil and gas. We've got some of the greatest employees out there in the field.
That's right.
I mean, they're like real cowboys and Marines, and they're taking the beaches. And in the rest of the critical earth minerals, it's so sad about the humanitarian issue of the critical minerals that we need.
No question about
it. This discussion of you leading the charge as an industry leader has even farther reach than just oil and gas or windmills or anything else. And so how do we even take it to the next level? You've done an excellent job of this. Are you going to write another book on because you've talked about getting here, and it seems like we could actually get there now that we've had a major shift in the world, Mark. All of a sudden, the whole world's waking up and going, we're going to have dead people, and we're going to have people dying in Europe because of the inability of energy. The U.S. could even grow bigger in helping the world. but I think you could be one of the leading factors of how we get to that next step.
Well, I appreciate that vote of confidence, and I hope to be part of that for sure. Through the podcast we talked about, I do have a column that's in Oil Man magazine, and it's been for the last 9 years. I've been a columnist. I'm a contributing editor to the magazine, and then they also have a magazine called Energies magazine and Oil Woman magazine. So I've contributed to those, but I'm definitely putting out articles, and it's not just about oil by any means. We talk about wind, we talk about solar, we talk about other avenues for our future. So it's one way to get the message out. So, and I was a writer for some newspapers, several newspapers around the state and outside the state.
Right.
Then the book is this is the 6th book I've written. I got started back in the acquisition process, due diligence, maximize risk, minimize return, maximize return, minimize risk. Excuse me.
Right.
I can't remember my own book title, Sue, but anyway, that's what it was. And it was back in the 1988 through about 1992 timeframe that I got involved with that era of acquisitions. But those books kind of tell a story going back to those. And a lot of these books, I don't try to sell all these books. The hardback are given out, where the Kindle or if you want to get Kindle or ebook on those, you can do those. Right. But most of these books that I carry around with me, I do this so that I'm handing them to stakeholders, people are really going to look at it, try to make a difference. And I'm giving those out to several stakeholders along the way. The movie that's coming out that we're putting together is called Sherwood Forest, or actually Sherwood, Top Secret. That's a film that should be completed in the next 2 or 3 weeks. We'll be we'll have a premiere. Barry Corbin is the narrator. He's a Texan, probably. He's been in over 200 films, and he's going to be, he's a great part of the narration. We had film that was provided back from the 1940s in the archives from British Petroleum. This story is based upon, Stu, in 1943, the British approached the Americans that there was not enough oil being produced in Britain in Sherwood Forest, and they said there's a great reserve there. So America sent, they're actually mainly Oklahomans, and they, through Noble Company, they sent around 40 roughnecks over there, a little over 40. Right. And they had to live in a monastery. They had to, it's camouflage and all this. And Stu, they produced, in a year and a half time frame, produced from 150 barrels of oil per day to 3,000 barrels of oil per day. And part of that oil was used from D-Day. And it's a great story. We had about 58, 60 crew and cast on the locations. I mentioned about an Emmy-winning or Emmy-nominated actor, which is Barry Corbin. We also have Gray Frederickson, who is again my partner on that. He's a Godfather 2, Academy Award. Emmy-winning director is Greg Millott. Sean Lynch, as a production manager, has been on numerous films. It's a well put together. It's been well received from the early stages. But
how cool is this?
But that's telling the story of where we were in the 1940s, where we are today, and look how critical energy in our industry is to this day and on forward. It takes all of us, but it takes a very focused group of energy folks to come together and use all their expertise. Look at all the expertise we have, from landmen, to geologists, geophysicists, engineers, attorneys, accountants. It takes all this, I call it energy family, to make it work. And we need that support from the community and the public. And that's what we're doing. We're taking it to the public, that film. It's not going to be at any cost. Going back to cost, it's going to be for public education only. So we'll not charge a dime for somebody to come see it. If you want a DVD, then it's handed to you, because we're not going to be charging. So
how cool is this?
That's the goal. That's the goal. And of course, it depends how limited we are in funding to get those out. But that's what we're trying to do, and go to the communities and show. And again, it's got to be a private. It's not a public showing in the sense of funding. It can be shown at a theater, but it won't be the charge. It'll have to be underwritten or sponsored, something like that.
Now, Mark, I read so much, and it's hard to believe. Yes, I did go to OSU, and I'm not going to use. I'll have another OSU joke here in a sec. But didn't they just recently? Didn't we airlift some folks to help Sherwood Forest again just recently?
I'm not aware of that,
I,
but yeah, it could be easily, because there's a lot of things going on as far as X goes. The Prime Minister of England, the new one,
yes,
that's been appointed, is very supportive of the oil and gas industry. So that may be what that's referring to as well, because she stepped forward in a big way.
Because of her, they just brought a bunch of roughnecks out, and I think the correlation.
Wow, what a story! What a story! Yeah.
All of a sudden, not only was your book good back then, it's now really needed now. And we're talking about Sherwood Forest, and I'm going to go shoot you that article, because
please do.
The movie just coming out came true again. You're in a time machine, Mark. You're a true time machine here. Not
well,
only
I appreciate
that. It's so fun.
You make it fun because you're high energy, and that makes me, every time you talk to you, you bring the energy. Nothing moves without energy, and that's Stu and Mark. Hopefully we're going to get this message out. We've got to talk. We've got to dialogue. We've got to get out to the public, and I'm trying to find every avenue possible to make this work. And I appreciate the support, because it's going to take a lot more than just Mark and Stu. I mean, or Mark, LaCour, and others. It's an effort, and right now we're still behind a little bit, more than a little bit.
Curve.
Yeah.
And the sad part is your dedication all these years to elevate people out of poverty is overlooked by the discussion. Because I don't want to use the word trolling. And you were saying, hey, getting the story out there. I love throwing out bombs every once in a while and saying, hey, what do you think about climate change?
Right.
And I love bringing in the discussions, because I want to have factual discussions. If you want to tell me something, let's have a great discussion. And some people don't always want to have that open discussion.
Well, it's funny you say that, Stu, because when I became partner with Gray back in 2001 in the film industry, because we didn't just do energy films, we've done 3 energy documentaries. But I'd go to LA with him. We'd be sitting with some names you would know, that different, because he knew a lot of those folks. Through years, he'd been in The Outsiders and all these Francis Ford Coppola movies and so forth. So we went to LA together. He was very, very well known and greeted. And he would introduce me, and he'd get a big bang out, because he'd say, "This is my partner in the film industry. He's in the oil and gas industry, energy industry." Right. And they would start frowning or complaining about the oil and gas industry, energy industry. And so I'd say, "Well, what do you wear? What are you wearing today?" And they'd say, "Well, the shirt." I said, "You know where the shirt, how it was made? What about the pants you're wearing? What about your shoes? By the way, what about your glasses? And by the way, what do you use? Back at the time, CNG or unleaded, or what are you doing?"
Right.
And it was really interesting to get their feedback, because it really shut down really fast. And yet they got the message. And I did it nicely, of course, and they moved on. But move on means some of those actually, some of them, very few, but some have contacted me and said, I remember our conversation in the past, and we really appreciate what you said, because it was a dialogue, and then let them, not try to get them on the defensive side. That doesn't work.
Right.
It's more of saying, were you aware? Are you aware? And then a lot of them weren't aware. And whether it's talking about climate change or whatever, some things they're just not, the public or industry leaders outside of our industry, movie industry, so forth. It takes so much electricity on a movie set. It takes all the people involved. When you see all these action films, I wrote an article on that, about that years ago, because it was necessary to show that the energy industry supports the movie industry. Without it, you wouldn't be in a movie theater. You sure wouldn't be watching it streaming. I mean, on and on. So they depend on us, and they should not keep downing what we're trying to do to make sure they stay in business. So
now, isn't that a hoot? I mean, you bring up the hypocrisy. Leonardo DiCaprio, as I say, I can't even say his name, because
he's in my article, by the way. So back, because he'd gone to Switzerland and in his jets and so forth. So anyway, go ahead. Yeah, that's I know where you're coming from.
But yeah, I was interviewing some authors out of Canada, and he went up there. I believe it was Terry Edom's book, "The Insanity of Fossil Fuels," or this. Anyway, he's a nut. But Leonardo had gone up to the oil field sands up in Canada, which we need that heavy oil.
Yes, we do, big time.
And that would be out of the Keystone. That somebody we happen to know killed it in the first day of his thing. And Leonardo was up there saying, "Oh, it's evil." And then you're sitting there thinking, he's flying around in the world in his hypocrisy jet.
Right.
We ought to come up with a plain name, the hypocrisy jet. That just sounds like a great name.
Well, it once you start, you and myself and others start really doing it even at one at a time, talking to one person at a time, like a Leonardo or whoever it might be. They are, most of these are not really confrontational. They're not aware. I think the key is I want to make you aware that what you're wearing or what you use or whatever it might be, all the plastics you're using. I had a gentleman that we had a debate about the future of plastics and energy and so forth, and he was not on the side of oil and gas at the time, but his wife got ill on a trip. Had to stop in Houston, and she actually went to the hospital in Houston.
Right.
And it wound up that when he got back, we were talking. He said, "By the way, Mark," he said, "I've come kind of full circle with this deal. I looked around the room. What saved my wife's life, because she was very, very ill, were all the plastics." from the making sure she got the shots to everything. I mean, it was on and on. And so to see look around the room, he said there wasn't anything that didn't touch the oil and gas business that saved my wife's life. And so I said, thank you for letting me know that. But that's the kind of the awareness that all of a sudden they go, wow, we're making an impact. We're not trying to tear down the world. We're trying to make it better. And you look at all the energy companies, oil and gas especially, that have helped universities, helped all the schools. They're giving back to nonprofits. They're probably the biggest givers on a percentage basis that you can find. Very big-hearted people, and so that's what we've got to make sure people are aware of that we can make your community a better place, not only with providing energy, but also providing finances and supporting like STEM projects. STEM is a big part of it, and been a big part of my life as well. I've been very involved with STEM, and want to continue that.
But ESG, we only have a few more minutes, but on the ESG front, ESG has been now thrown around here. Everybody's like ESG this, and it's almost like they were with Trump, Russia, or the Brady bunch, Marsha. Everybody's going ESG, and nobody knows how to spell it. And you sit back and go, ESG actually did some good things for our industry by giving. I mean, it set the tone for being able to give money back to shareholders, to help go through that. And where I'm going with this, Mark, is I am so proud of the CEOs of the oil industry standing up to the current administration just recently, when they were forced in saying, "Hey, give us a yes or no," and they said, "No, we are going to increase drilling, and we're going to go ahead and give money back to our investors." And wasn't that cool about the quote that just was done in when the CEO of, I believe, JP Morgan or one of them, he said it would be utter hell if the U.S. went out there. I mean, that was a great quote this past week.
No question about it. ESG, I compare it to, remember when we used to do the phase 1 environmental assessments, and we were being pushed to do more of that, which is fine. It turned out fine in the sense, because why did it turn out fine? Because we wound up, instead of being pushed to do it, we wound up taking the lead. And I think the same thing with ESG, environmental social governance, is what I've been encouraged. I wrote an article on that called the ESG factor. Instead of saying it's bad or whatever, I looked at it from the standpoint that it's actually good for our, as far as addressing it.
Maybe
ESG is a very important thing to do, but it's got to be under control and not going stretch it to where we're out of business, that kind of thing as well. So we've got to have a balance there. In itself, ESG factor can be helpful looked at, but we don't need to look at it like it is right now, where it's forcing us out of business. That's not the purpose, in my view. It's more of how can we work together, like having environmental assessments. We're healthy if done properly and not necessarily overregulated. And now we're being overregulated. ESG is just a way to get us out of business, and that's not. ESG in itself could be good if factored in properly, but it's not right now. So we've got to stand. And I like what you're saying. These people are making quotes and standing for what's right.
Oh, absolutely. And when you sit back and take a look, I would rather buy oil and natural gas from the U.S. and Canada. I mean, let's just buy oil and gas from U.S., Canada, and Mexico and trade, rather than with people that hate us, because we need the blends. But anyway, we need to talk about all that on another podcast, Mark.
I'd love to. It's just wonderful. Thank you for all you do. Really, really appreciate you.
Well, thank you. I'll give you when I buy you a steak, we'll go over that. But give me your last thoughts. Besides your new podcast, tell everybody again what your new podcast is.
Yes, the Energy Fellows podcast comes out October 4th, and OGGN. And go to markstansberry.com to keep up with everything I'm doing as far as activity.
Okay.
markstansberry.com. And that'll keep you up to date, and the audience up to date as well.
And I just want to give a shout out to Mark for introducing us. And
yes, so wonderful.
I can't wait to see if we're gonna put it in there and say we want to thank Mark for his service as a Marine, and we'll see if he even listens to this.
I'm sure glad you said that, because you're right. What a sacrifice he's made for our country, and thanks to Mark and others. Yes, thanks for mentioning.
You bet. And with that last bit, I'm going to go ahead and say thank you again to our sponsor, Enverus. They have got the whole data string in the energy environment, and we really appreciate them sponsoring this podcast. So thanks, and we'll see you guys soon.